When we were starting out as investors, one of the hardest things to work out was the entry and holding costs associated with buying property in Australia, which is why in today's video, we're gonna look at two super simple examples of what the entry and holding costs on a $500,000 property and $1 million property look like in Australia in 2024.
All right, well, let's look at an example of a $500,000 property. Now, we always like to assume a 20% deposit, so that would be $100,000 on the 500K property. These numbers are based on a property purchase up here in Queensland. There's 4 major entry costs that we've got to look at and a few extra entry costs to consider. So the first entry cost is looking at the stamp duty that you have to pay to the government when buying property. Now, on a 500K property, with a $100,000 deposit, you're looking at paying the government about $18,000 in stamp duty. The next is to look at a solicitor or a conveyancer that can support you through the process of finalizing that contract. Now, we find that you're generally going to pay somewhere between about $2,000 to $3,000 for a really high quality solicitor up here in Queensland. I know there is some more affordable options out there, but you get what you pay for. The next one is a building and pest inspector, which we get for about $500 per report up here in Queensland. And in my opinion, these things are worth their weight in gold because you get so much information about the structural integrity of that property that you're looking at buying. There may be some additional entry costs as well. You know, if you do need a town planning report, if you're looking at building a granny flat or doing a duplex or some form of development, you may need to pay some extra rates and water from the previous owner as well. You may have to pay some bank fees as well. So these generally average between about $1,000 to $2,000 of those entry costs. And the last thing to consider is the rising popularity of buyer's agents. So you can generally find these throughout the country that charge somewhere between about $12,000 to $20,000 per property, which may be an entry cost to get you into the market as well. So when you go out and buy a $500,000 property, you are looking at spending around $35,000 to $40,000 in entry costs to get into the market.
Beautiful. So now you're in the market, you bought your 500K property. What are the ongoing holding costs that people can expect from a 500K property?
So the 6 holding costs that we need to calculate on this $500,000 property include the interest, insurance, rates, water, management, and maintenance of a property. So to start with the interest, understanding that we've got $400,000 worth of debt left over after the $100,000 deposit, if we assume a 6% interest-only investment loan, you'll be paying $24,000 in interest to the banks. The next is insurance, which is variable property by property, but most of the ones that we buy average around about $2,000 per annum in insurance. Once again, rates will depend on the local government area that you buy in, but we find that most of these range from somewhere between $2,000 to $4,000 per annum. Now, water depends on usage, and most of the time if you're investing in Queensland, you can charge the tenant for that water usage, but it ends up costing around $1,200 per annum. Now, as an example, if you're able to rent that 500K property out for say $500 per week, you're getting $25,000 per year in rent. And up here in Queensland, the average property manager will charge around 7 to 9% plus GST of the rent. So you're generally paying them around $1,750 per year in management, which once again is worth its weight in gold. They deal with so many of the problems with that property and making sure that your tenants are doing the right thing by you, but that is something that you need to factor in. Then we've got the maintenance, and once again, this is a difficult one to calculate because it really depends on the type of property that you buy. Whether you buy an older home or if you're building a newer home, then you may not have too much maintenance to calculate. But on a 500K property, I budget for about $1,000 per year of maintenance. But those maintenance costs can blow out massively if something does go wrong. Like your air conditioning unit breaks or your hot water system blows. Although when my hot water system broke, I actually got onto Gumtree, found one for like $300 and got a local plumber to install it for me for another couple of $100. So it's cheap as, so I guess it depends on how much work you're willing to do with that one. But yeah, maintenance can be a bit of a drag on those older style properties, and I know from experience. So adding up all of those holding costs, it comes in at about $32,950 per year of holding costs, minus that $25,000 per year that you're generating through the rental income. So it costs around $7,000 to $8,000 per year to hold that $500,000 property at a 6% interest only rate based on the numbers that we've looked at today. But at the end of the day, not everybody wants to go and buy a $500,000 property. In fact, a lot of people that we work with are going for those $1 million blue chip premium properties in Queensland. So what are the numbers looking like when you get up to that $1 million budget in Queensland?
So let's say you go out there and you buy your $1 million property with a 20% cash deposit. So effectively you've got $800,000 worth of debt remaining. Now in terms of the entry costs, they're the same old entry costs on a $1 million property as well. The first one is stamp duty, which works out to be about $42,000 on a $1 million purchase. Now, even though they sting you on the stamp duty, the other costs are relatively the same on a $500K versus a $1 million property. So the soliciting or conveyancing fees and searches come in at between 2 to 3K. Building and pest is around about that $500. The other settlement costs that Simon talked about, like the bank fees, etc., sit at about that $2,000 mark. And then you've got that buyer's agent fee if you decide to go that way, which sits at about $12,000 to $20,000. Taking the total entry costs, not including your cash deposit, to $61,500. Now, if you're putting in less than a 20% cash deposit and you're using equity or a lower loan to value ratio, then you might also have one extra entry cost, which is mortgage lender's insurance. Now, this varies significantly depending on lender to lender and how much they want to squeeze from you at that time. But I found somewhere between a 12 and a 13% deposit dramatically reduces that lender's mortgage insurance you pay directly to the bank.
Oh, I forgot to mention that during my one. The old LMI, the banks definitely know where to sting you. But anyways, it is what it is. And it's allowed me to get into the market a hell of a lot sooner by paying a little bit of LMI on my way in. But what are the holding costs on a $1 million property?
So in this example, we might say that we're getting $800 a week in rent or $40,000 per year in rent. Now, the first cost on a $1 million property with 800K debt is interest. So 6% on $800,000 on an interest-only loan spits out at about $48,000 per year in interest. Now, the second cost is the insurance on the property, which could be anywhere between $2,000 to $4,000, depending on which insurance company you go with or if you're working directly with an insurance broker. The next cost is rates, which again vary like water significantly, but we'll put in for this example rates of about $3,000 per year. We've then got the water fee, which again varies significantly. Some states in Australia will make you pay for the administration fee and the water usage charge. Other states in Australia, like Queensland, just make you pay for the admin, which, like Simon's 500K example, spits out at about $1,200 a year. Then we've got the management on the property. Now, one of the cool things I love about my property managers as well is they do pay things like my rates, my water bills as well. They're constantly educating me on the market. They're doing all of the physical inspections on the property as well. I'd highly recommend working with the quality companies around Australia, like the Ray Whites, the Hardcourts, and whoever the best is in your local area for your investment. Now, based on $40,000 per year and paying 7% per year in management, we're looking at a fee of about $3,360 per year, which, like Simon said, is worth every single dollar. One of the last costs in the property is maintenance, which again can be almost nothing in some years and much higher in other years. But for a $1 million property that I own, I look at about $2,000 per year in annum. And that could be bigger things like Simon mentioned, or just little things like screen doors not working, pool compliance, gardening, landscaping, all those little bits and pieces that come up over time. Now, on top of these costs that Simon and I both mentioned, when you hold a property longer term, there can be two others that come up. One of them is land tax, which you can talk to your financial advisor or accountant about, and varies massively depending on the state in Australia that you're buying in. The other cost which can come up, which Simon and I were talking about off camera, which really isn't a true cost, is just renovating and adding value to property. So once every 10 to 15 years, you're obviously going to have to do things like paint, put new flooring down, replace blinds, tidy up gardens.
Now, at the end of the day, there are some pretty significant entry costs and holding costs for owning properties in Australia. But if we look at the last 50 years, according to Simon Priestley, the annual capital growth rate for Australian houses has been around 8.2% per annum, and rental growth has been around 2.5% per annum at the same rate as inflation. So over time, with the property value going up, with the weekly rental return going up, and hopefully seeing that debt drop over time, you can get some really great growth over the long term. So that's why we love property. If you look at it on a year-to-year basis, it can be pretty tricky, but if you look at it over a decade or two, then the numbers really start to work.
If you're thinking about buying an investment property in the next 3 to 6 months, then the team and I at Pumped On Property would love to offer you a one-on-one strategy session. To book the session, all you have to do is go to www.pumpedonproperty.com and click that free strategy session button. Now, in the session, we'll talk about exactly where you are right now, where you'd like to be longer term, and educate you deeply on the Australian property market. You can then take that information and go and absolutely smash it on your own, or potentially become one of the small number of clients that we work with each month. Either way, we look forward to continuing to help you build your property portfolio with confidence on your journey to financial freedom.